Hey there. I was walking through the East End of London a few years ago on a business trip, and I stopped into this old, no-nonsense pub. The kind with dark wood and a faint smell of polish. And the barman, an older gentleman, saw me looking at a black and white photo behind the bar. It was of two men in sharp suits, smiling, surrounded by people. He leaned over and said, "The Krays. They were gentlemen. They took care of their own." And then he paused, wiped a glass, and added, "But they were also monsters." That contradiction, that fatal charm, has always fascinated me. How did two men become both local legends and national nightmares? Welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is Underworld Kings, the rise and fall from Light, Not Studios. Today, we're diving into the gilded cage of 1960s London to unravel episode 15, The Kray Twins' Fatal Charm. How London's gangster icons courted their own downfall. For a brief, shimmering moment, Ronnie and Reggie Kray weren't just gangsters, they were icons. They weren't hiding in the shadows, they were holding court in them. They owned glamorous nightclubs like the Double R and the Kentucky in the East End. Their clientele wasn't just other criminals, it was a dizzying mix of politicians, peers of the realm, celebrities, and socialites. They were photographed with stars like Judy Garland and Diana Dors. They moved in a world of tailored suits, cigar smoke, and a veneer of respectability that they were desperate to believe was real. This was their stage, and they performed flawlessly. They were the charismatic hosts, the generous benefactors to local charities, the twins who looked after Bethnal Green. And this very performance, this cultivated image, was the first thread they would pull to unravel their own empire. Because that glamour required constant, and increasingly reckless, maintenance. The clubs were fronts, but they also became traps. To keep the celebrities coming and the champagne flowing, they had to project invincibility. Any slight, any challenge to their authority couldn't be handled discreetly. It had to be a public spectacle, a brutal lesson. This is where their fatal charm curdled into fatal violence. The more famous they became, the more they believed their own mythology, that they were above the law, that their cocktail party friendships with powerful people were a shield. So when a rival gang member, George Cornell, dared to call Ronnie Kray a fat poof in a pub, it wasn't just an insult. It was a crack in the facade. In March 1966, Ronnie walked into the Blind Beggar pub in Whitechapel in front of witnesses and shot Cornell in the head. The old rules of gangland discretion were gone. This was a public execution, a performance of power for an audience of terrified regulars. It was an act of such staggering arrogance, believing their notoriety would intimidate witnesses into silence forever. And then there was the other side of their duality, their private life, which was anything but glamorous. While Reggie struggled to maintain a semblance of a normal marriage, Ronnie's mental state, always volatile, was deteriorating under the weight of his own paranoid grandiosity. He fancied himself a wartime general, a ruler of a criminal empire. His homosexuality, in a fiercely intolerant time, was an open secret that added a layer of explosive risk. The twins surrounded themselves with a sycophantic entourage, the firm, but it was less a loyal army and more a collection of hangers-on attracted by the reflected glow. They were loyal out of fear, not devotion. This inner circle became a liability. The violence needed to maintain their myth was now spilling out in ways they couldn't fully control, creating a growing pool of men who had witnessed too much, who carried too much fear and resentment. Which brings us to the final, and perhaps most ironic, way they engineered their downfall, their obsession with legacy. They didn't just want power, they wanted to be remembered as important. They actively courted the media, posing for famous photographers like David Bailey. They loved seeing their names in the papers. But this created a glaring, public spotlight that Scotland Yard could no longer ignore. For years, the twins had operated in a gray area where fear and corrupted local officers protected them. But their very fame made them a priority for a new breed of detective. Detective Superintendent Leonard Nipper Reed was tasked with bringing them down. And the Krays, in their arrogance, gave him the tools. Their high-profile lives created a map of clubs, associates, and enemies. Their need for violent, public revenge created witnesses. Their belief that they were untouchable made them careless. The downfall, when it came, was swift and total. In May 1968, Based on the meticulous case built by Red, the twins and members of their firm were arrested in a series of coordinated dawn raids. The trial at the Old Bailey was the most sensational of its era. The very celebrities and lords they'd partied with now fled from the association. The glamorous image evaporated, revealing the brutal reality: charges of murder, armed robbery, and protection rackets. They were convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with a recommendation they serve at least 30 years. The kings of London were dethroned, not in a gangland shootout, but in a courtroom, by the very system they thought they'd outsmarted. It's a story that always makes me reflect on the architecture of a downfall. As an engineer, I see systems, how forces balance, how structures bear load. The Krays built a spectacular, Gothic structure. The foundation was fear. The pillars were violence and corruption. But the facade, the beautiful, distracting facade, was charm and celebrity. And they became so obsessed with maintaining that facade, with polishing that exterior, that they didn't notice the foundation was cracking. They kept adding weight, more fame, more audacious violence, more public attention, until the whole edifice collapsed under its own contradictions. They needed to be both feared criminals and beloved celebrities, and that is an impossible equation to sustain. You cannot be a myth and a man at the same time. The myth will always demand a sacrifice of the man. So what are we left with? Not with the glamorous gangsters of legend, but with a cautionary tale about the price of a manufactured image. The Krays were ultimately imprisoned not just by concrete and bars, but by the monstrous personas they created for themselves. Their fatal charm wasn't just their ability to attract followers and fame. It was the magnetic pull of their own egos, which drew them inexorably toward the cliff's edge. Thank you for listening to this episode of Underworld Kings. If these stories of the intricate designs of power and their fatal flaws resonate with you, please do share the podcast with someone who'd appreciate it. For more deep dives into history's most compelling rises and falls, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This is Ibnul J. Farabi for Light Not Studios. Until next time, take care.